Welcome to the Healthy AF podcast. I'm your host, Zane Griggs. With me today is Jason Atkinson. Jason, thanks for joining me.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you.
Jason is an author, a certified health coach, personal trainer, and the host of the Health Hackers podcast. So glad you could join me because you've got quite a story, and I love sharing stories like this where someone had a struggle, like a health struggle, and then through their own kind of journey, they found a way to start not only help themselves improve their own health, but start helping other people. And that's exactly what you've done. So that's fantastic.
Yes, 100%. That is the case. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you were, no, so if anybody wants to see this, but you were at 254, you weighed 254 pounds at 33% body fat.
That's right.
And I saw a picture like on your Eat Meat, Not Wheat website. eatmeat.notwheat.com. If anyone wants to see the before and after, it's on the front page of his website. Quite a difference
Yeah,
there.
I had to snap that domain name. That's a great slogan.
It
I'm
is.
sure we'll get into the meaning of eat meat, your wheat, what that's all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's a great place to see. If you want to see a before and after, check out the podcast there, and you can see, the website there, excuse me, and you can see quite the difference between then and now. So you were, I just read on there, you were struggling with high blood pressure. That was kind of like your red flag.
Yeah, that was really my wake-up call. A lot of people tend to respond to their pain point, and sometimes it has to get very painful, unfortunately, for us to, pay attention to what's going on and make the necessary changes. Some people, sadly, never really get the message. They just continue to hurt or continue to feel bad or take medication after medication to try to treat the symptoms of what I feel are reversible lifestyle-related conditions. And that's where I found myself. Fortunately, I didn't become another victim of the sick care system that we have in this country, which is something that I think you and I are both opposed to, seem to be aligned with my views and philosophy on that. My doctor's office notified me, yes, that I was weighing 254 pounds and that I was in the early stages of developing high blood pressure. So I just decided very quickly I did not want to have high blood pressure. And I asked, what could I do about it? Of course, they offered medication as a possible solution, or you might lose some weight and hope that will help. Well, I wondered exactly how should I do that. And when I asked the doctor's office personnel, medical personnel about this, they were kind of clueless, and it became very apparent to me that that system's not really set up to help anyone get healthy. And unfortunately, as a society, we're all paying the price of that method of doing things. So that's really become the rallying cry around which, all my content online and in my books revolves around the idea of taking charge of your own health, not just relying on a system that's maybe not always having our best interest.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. They're not really in the practice of prevention. They're in the practice of treatment. So, or reversing disease. It's like they don't have the time for it either. They don't have the time. They don't have the knowledge. Right. It's not how they're trained, right? They're certainly not trained on that in med school or nursing school or anything like that. So you were already working out at the time. You already thought you were living a fairly healthy lifestyle, right?
Exactly. I did enjoy working out. I had, several years of history with that. And although I grew up as the quote unquote fat kid, throughout my childhood and early teenage years, around my early 20s, I finally kicked it in gear, kind of lost some weight, started enjoying working out. And if any of your listeners that are about our age will probably remember Bill Phillips' Body for Life contest, the famous before and after transformation. There was a book, and it just had a little simple outline for nutrition and a workout that you could follow. The idea was you would take your before and after photos and submit that, become a contestant, possibly win his Lamborghini Diablo that he was giving away, or some, $50,000 grand prize. But that really caught my interest, and that was my entry into working out, learning about nutrition, even, goal setting and achievement. These were all new to me in my early 20s. And, life kind of happens. about 10, 15 years later, I found myself even in worse condition, just due to a lot of life circumstances. I was a single father for 3 years. I had been through a divorce, and I had 3 children that I was trying to manage on my own, which any single parents out there, I'm sure, can agree that that's a high stress lifestyle. And the food choices were not always the best, and I didn't always really have time to prioritize exercise. So when things finally settled down, I was able to undo some of the damage that had accumulated over the previous 10 years. And that was really my cue to just go back to what I knew as far as working out and eating a certain way. And as time went by, I refined and kind of created my own program. And so that, information is what I'm making available to the public today through my social media channels, and my writings and recordings that I'm putting out there now is kind of a synthesis of all these great ideas.
Gotcha. Well, what would you say would be the biggest changes that you made that had the greatest impact, the most leverage to help you really lose that weight and change the direction of your health was going at the time?
I feel that exercise and nutrition are both important. And I think that if you're working out all the time and you're not eating a certain way, or if you're going out of your way to really clean up your diet, but you're not really putting much emphasis on exercise, either way, you're going to get about half the results. It's kind of a 50-50 thing. So probably if I just had to pick, I know our society craves this one simple trick methodology that they've, been bombarded with through advertisements over the years. If I could just change that one thing, but actually a lot of people that are far off like I was, there are lots of things that need to change. It starts with the mindset, and then it goes into the, like I said, the exercise and nutrition. But, if I just had to pick out one overwhelming thing, I would say the dietary changes I made had the most impact. I was diligent to work out, 5 or 6 times a week, and I put a lot of time and effort into that. But I think the main thing that had to change was the way I was eating, carelessly, too much processed food, not enough protein and nutrients, typical pattern that we see with the majority of the population in the U.S.
Right. So what did you change? I mean, you said you eliminate some processed food.
Yeah.
There's a lot of options out there with diets. So what direction did you go in? I mean, were you searching? Did you try different ones? Did you search through different ones, or did you kind of know?
I've tried just about everything that's come down the pike. There's a famous quote from Bruce Lee, and I don't want to butcher this, but he said something to the effect of absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add to it what is specifically your own. So low carb has been a good base plan for me. I went through the same probably history that a lot of people do, beginning with something like I mentioned, Body for Life, basic bodybuilding type diet that's maybe a little higher in carbohydrate, a little lower in fat compared to the standard American diet, of course, high in protein. And progressing from that to a lower carb approach, getting into the whole paleo idea of doing things, just avoiding processed foods for the most part, which eliminates the worst offenders such as sugar, flour, and industrial seed oils, along with some other things like dairy, which is iffy depending on which branch of paleo you want to follow. If you're more of a primal type, you might see that dairy would be okay in some instances. I personally have never had a problem with it, but eliminating the sugar and the flour, just going to a grain-free way of doing things was kind of the way I got into paleo, was just eliminating all grains. I didn't see personally legumes as being very problematic, so that's something I might have still done from time to time. But, after doing that for a few years, seeing some benefit from going grain-free, I decided to jump on the keto bandwagon, along with 90% of the population probably. Got caught up in that publicity of it. And I have to say, it's a game changer. If you've never tried a ketogenic diet of any type, it was a true game changer for me in terms of appetite control and started getting sustainable results again. Eventually, that transitioned into a more of a carnivore kind of way of doing things, if you want to say it that way. Basically, a high protein, low carb approach is what I've settled on, which is very similar to what the bodybuilders did back in the 60s and 70s. They knew if they were getting cut for a competition, they were just going to cut out potatoes and fruit and rice and anything that, was a high starch food or high sugar food, except for one day a week where they would just basically eat everything in sight, ice cream, pie, pizza, whatever, and then just go right back on track with it. So that's been a sustainable approach for me now for several years. I've maintained, body fat, 65 pounds of body fat that I was. I've maintained now for 7 years or so. So, I've been in a maintenance type phase, but, constantly trying to push it a little bit further, see if I can gain a little more muscle, lose a little more body fat, or some combination of the two.
Gotcha. Right. So you ended up with a kind of a mix of carnivore, animal based, like you get a little bit of carb in there here and there, but mostly it's animal based, animal food centric. Is a safe way to put it?
High protein, low carb, animal centric for sure. Staples, my daily way of doing things would be eggs, salmon, beef. Those are things I consume on a daily basis. A couple of scoops of whey protein, just to kind of round it out. Maybe a Quest bar, a cookie. I've called this approach the carnivore Quest diet because it would be carnivore if it weren't for Quest chips and Quest bar and things like that. So just mostly whole food, but allow a little something in there if it fits that high protein, low carb way of doing things, which that's a little contrary to something dogmatic like paleo, where we would just think, oh, anything processed can't be on the menu, right? What people don't really realize, though, is throughout most of human history, processing foods actually improved their nutrient value. So, for example, if we cooked a food, we could extract more nutrients from it. If we fermented something, it would be more digestible. Somewhere along the way, we started processing foods to reduce the amount of nutrients, increase the amount of energy, and ended up with a host of addictive products that are very profitable for the food industry, and just so happened to produce a nice little revenue stream for the pharmaceutical industry in the process. So foods that don't fit that mold, if something's high protein, high fiber, doesn't have a whole lot of empty energy calories in it, doesn't have a lot of junk ingredients that we're trying to avoid, I give it a green light.
Gotcha. So you got a little mix of there, but mostly a whole food, animal centric with a little room to like adjust or have a little play in the diet for convenience or practicality of schedules, things like that. Yeah. Good. Okay. Great. So, and obviously you're working with people now. So obviously you're helping people do similar approach, similar diet, exercise.
Yeah. After getting certified as a health coach and a nutritionist, along with my personal training certification, I began working for a commercial health club, just helping new members to acclimate to the gym, giving them an idea of a workout program that they might be able to do, giving them some best practices on nutrition and mindset, and just overseeing the personal training department that interacts directly with the clients on a daily basis. But just to be there as an extra level of support to help, tracking metrics and things like that. So this has also been helpful to me as just independent research. I get to look at a lot of body scans and get an idea for body fat percentages, amount of visceral fat on average that people have, the inflammation levels, and some other health markers. So in the back of my mind, I'm storing this data, for future reference, because I like to see what works with people. When you recommend something and they do it and you see marked improvement, it's very gratifying. And that's something that we don't always get, through online interaction. Maybe you can only do that through, one-on-one or in-person consultation. So yeah, that's a big bonus as well. But I love what I'm doing. I spent 5 years earning a degree in education. I taught biology and human anatomy very briefly, and decided I did not want to remain working in the public school system. So I pivoted. I got into holistic nutrition. I did that for several years. And now I've gone more into the health coaching and training end of things. So it's been a labor of love. Just having a personal story that can maybe motivate or inspire other people, and just having like a set of principles that are universally applicable. I mean, just almost anyone can apply things like eliminating sugar and flour from your diet, start doing some strength training on a daily basis, drink more water, get better quality sleep, simple things like that. That's the real solution to our health crisis.
Right. Real simple method, simple living. Nothing too complex, but it's just about changing some habits, obviously. So changing the way you think about those things, as you've talked about with your mindset. So I think that's probably the first part, where you're changing how you're thinking about your health and what your habits, and thinking about food.
I think awareness is the biggest piece of that. A lot of people are just unconsciously following habit patterns without really thinking about what they're doing, or even realizing that it might be harmful. But at the same time, we've also experienced a lot of bad information in this country, disinformation, if you want to call it that. That's the way I refer to it. But sometimes people are well-intentioned, but they're operating on false principles. So if you have to turn a doorknob to the right to open it, but you're trying to turn it to the left, it's never going to open, no matter how much pressure you apply, because you're really going in the wrong direction. So I think that if people had better quality information, they could make better decisions that would lead to better outcomes. So re-educating people is a big part of what I do on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, there's enough information out there to confuse people and certainly take them in the wrong direction, with our research and recommendations being hijacked by, like you said, by private corporations, by processed food companies. So that really is where, you're pushing back against an overwhelming, well-marketed narrative. And that's been going for 50, at least 40 years, if not 50 years, to try to change the way we think about food away from the way we've been doing just fine. And previous to that, as a country where obesity was not certainly where it is now, people may not have been exercising as much, but they were a lot healthier, a lot thinner. It seems that, our food system has been hijacked, and that's where we've had all these health problems. So, but after 50 years, there's a lot of ideology that has to be adjusted and changed, and the narrative has to be, they want to know, but it's hard to know what to believe. So like a story like yours, where you say, hey, look, this was me then, and after this much time of doing this is where I am now, and I've maintained it for 7 years. That's hard to argue with. You can't argue with someone's personal experience. Yeah. So that's awesome.
Testimonials are so powerful. That's why.
They are. Now, your book that you have a book out right now on Amazon. It's called Live Like an Athlete. I assume that's reflective of kind of what you went through to lose the weight.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a memoir, if you want to say it that way. I did include a lot of I just wanted to, collect all of my best practices in one place. Although now the material is a little outdated because it's not exactly what I do or what I promote. I've learned a lot since then. Published that book 5 years ago. So it's time for an update, and the new information just builds on the previous information. But the title, really comes more from the mindset side of things, the idea of living like an athlete. Athletes don't just wing it. They don't just wait until they're starving to figure out what food is convenient. They're either going to plan this in advance, if not bring a meal with them, or at least be prepared ahead of time so that they can stay on a schedule. They have their exercise laid out. They know exactly which body parts they're going to train on what days and what intensity, where they are in periodization for the year. Is this a strength gaining phase? Is this more power and endurance phase? Things like that. they don't just kind of wait and see what happens. They're goal oriented. They have a plan. They've got a season. They know I got to show up for whatever at this point in time and be in this condition, and they make it happen. And that's what can make anyone successful. I'm not saying everyone has to operate like a professional athlete, but you can borrow the principle, or you can borrow the mindset of the athlete and the practices of an athlete to get similar results.
Sure. They had a deliberate, intentional plan where they think ahead. They're like, this is where I want to be. How do I get there? This is reverse engineer. This is what I have to do each day. This is what I have to do weekly, monthly, to get where I want to be. There's intentionality to what they do. They don't let it happen to them, right? They don't let their meals happen to them. They don't let their sleep schedule happen to them, or their workout, if they get to it, and they don't walk in lost. Like, what do I do today? Right? They're coming with intention. Now, so your book you have coming out then is probably, I guess, more reflective of your current ideology of this is called metabolic mastery, right? And that's coming out when?
Should be out in the next few months, being that I'm approaching that AF deadline. In about 5 months, I'll be turning 50. So I want to have it out prior to my 50th birthday. And it's got a lot more of the low carb. I want to really go through the history of how did we get in this mess in the first place. So much of that has to do with the dietary guidelines for Americans. We can track the obesity epidemic, and it began almost the moment the policy was set. Things started to trend in the wrong direction. And so if there's a ground zero for the obesity epidemic, I would say that was it. And that's where the whole idea of eat meat, not wheat comes from. Yeah, it's something simple you can tell someone just in passing. In an elevator, you could pass somebody and say, hey, eat meat, not wheat. Right? Easy for someone to remember. But the idea there is, yes, of course, more animal-based foods and less processed grains and sugars for sure. But also that's a metaphor for don't just blindly follow what you're told. Test it for yourself and see what works. Don't just eat wheat because someone said grains and sugar is great for your health. Test it and see. Don't just take whatever's get whatever ideas are given to you, but test it for yourself and be willing to do the opposite. Our great food guide pyramid was laid out for mostly financial purposes, not to really have anything to do with health. There's no health-related studies to show that a grain-based diet that's low in fat improves health or reverses heart disease or prevents heart disease or anything like that. But it was presented as such. And of course, we bought that en masse, hook, line, and sinker as a society. So that way of doing things would say, eat a lot of wheat and grains and just don't eat too many eggs and meat because it's got some fat in it and could be bad for you. Do the opposite and test that outcome for yourself and see what happens. Do it the other way around.
Right. Well, welcome to, welcome to 50 this year.
Well, thank you.
But as you know, over the last 10 years, I'm sure you can tell that your body's changed to the point where it takes a little more work, takes a little more effort, intentionality to maintain your weight now than it would have or did 10 years ago, right?
I would have to agree that, there's you got to be a little more diligent about things. You got a little less leeway.
Yeah.
Certain things.
Yeah. So as you age, it's like there's more need for, if you want to age well, if you want to be healthy and mobile, active, not so dependent on medications and so forth to manage your bodily systems, right?
Yes. Stretching and warming up and foam rolling. These are all things that within the past.
A lot more warm up.
Yeah, just improving the recovery process through any way possible. Something you don't really think about. Yeah, you don't even really think about that kind of stuff in your 30s and 40s, but mid 40s, early part of the 50s probably becomes more and more apparent that you're not indestructible, and that if anything's going to get damaged, it's going to be connective tissue usually. That's the first thing, first sign of injury. So knowing that and approaching training, with that thought process in mind.
For sure. For sure. I would think with your diet as well, just a little less room for the play, a little less room for error. And then sleep being another big one, being, I think, part of that. I think for me, I found it a little harder to be a little more diligent about my schedule. If I want to make sure I get a good night's sleep, about how late I'm eating, that kind of thing. I've just staying on a sleep schedule throughout the week, that kind of, it's just being in a sleep hygiene, if you will, for lack of a better term, to kind of set yourself up for that.
Yeah, I've always had really good sleep quality. It's never really been an issue. I'm normally asleep by 9 o'clock or in bed by 9 o'clock. My grandparents were farmers, so we were always up with the chickens, 5 a.m. That's still, I normally get up. I get up at 5 a.m. Even though I have to be anywhere for a couple of hours, but that's my sleep wake cycle. But I have noticed if the temperature's not right, it's a little too hot at night or something like that. So there are always things you can do to improve that. Plug up the little Himalayan salt lamp in the evening, get a little orange light, want the blue light exposure from screens and things like that. That orange light kind of mimics the sunset lighting and can help you produce more melatonin, fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer. The little things like that can help.
Yeah. No, it's great that you've got such a locked in sleep schedule. Most people, that's an area where they don't have a lot of discipline or continuity. So yours has been set, sounds like, for quite a while. So that's great. That's definitely an advantage. Awesome. So where is the best place for people to find you? I know we mentioned your eatmeatnotwheat.com website.
Yeah, that's a primary domain that I'm on. It's more or less a blog. The YouTube channel, Health Hackers on YouTube. You can actually just go to my link tree. That's linktr.ee/Health Hackers Podcast. You can find Health Hackers Podcast on any platform, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I'm all over the place. The podcast is audio only. Still have an audio only version of it out there, but I'm really seeing more YouTube as being the primary content creation vehicle, just because there's such a wide audience on that platform who may not ever want to listen to a podcast. They're visual. They want to see something to experience it. I've been a lover of podcasts now since, I almost in 2016, took about a year listening to some alternative health podcasts and thought, hey, I want to do one of those. Figured out how to publish it as an audio only and dabbled with YouTube a little bit, but now I'm getting more into actually creating the content through YouTube and then just having the audio only kind of as a ancillary to that, or an afterthought, if you will.
So your podcast is both on YouTube and the podcast apps and that's called the Health.
Yes.
Okay. The Health Hackers Podcast.
Yeah.
We'll link to that.
Okay. So health hacker is somebody like you. Okay. You use the system to your advantage, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't work, kind of hacking the system a little bit like a biohacker, if you want to say it that way, figuring out what are simple little things that you can change to get a massive result. But I chose that word intentionally because hacker can also be somebody who's kind of hacking their way through the jungle, if you will, or the underbrush of all the misinformation and bad ideas that are circulating out there to get to the truth. So
Gotcha. Yeah, it sometimes feels that way, doesn't it? Certainly what you have to do at first as you're trying to find your way and figure out what works for you and where the truth lies. That certainly has been an experience with that as well. But that's the Health Hackers Podcast. So we go on YouTube and on the podcast apps. But I will include your link tree in the show notes so people can just find what they need from you, as well as your Instagram and your website. So if people are reaching out and want to connect with you on whatever platform, But and wait for that book. You said the next 4 or 5 months. You said, huh? It's the
Yeah, I got to get it out there. I got a deadline now. I've already said it on the Healthy AF podcast. You know, it's got to happen.
That's a good to have deadlines. Yes, we're officially
Pressure on
now.
yourself.
Officially.
You do have to put some pressure on yourself. Yeah, you got to put pressure on yourself sometimes. You know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Goals are attained with deadlines for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason, for coming on. I appreciate you coming and sharing your story, and your experience. Like you said, you really can't beat that kind of experience and that kind of story to see in action. And I think it's great again that you're able to pass that on to so many other people. And you've been able to change your career and to do something you're actually much more interested in and passionate about. And that's always rewarding. That's always a rewarding feeling to take something you experienced and hand it off to somebody else like that. So well done.
It's a wonderful thing. And I'd like to thank you for being a guest on my show as well. You're just one of a growing number of people who are promoting the truth and showing, leading by example. So I appreciate that as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That was a great experience too. Well, Jason, have a great weekend. And I look forward to continue to connect with you and seeing your book come out in the next 4 months before your birthday, right?
You got it. Thank you.
All right.